is that, oops, there we go. The myth that, this distance, there we go. You've probably heard the level is the devil. Now be very, very careful. I'll just say it simply this way. If you're helping somebody in their younger years, 30, 40 years old, and they're socking away $500 a month into an IUL, you may want to use an increasing death benefit until when? Until they stop funding it, then you switch. All indexed universal life, if you're using it for living benefits, should use the level death benefit at some point. Our sweet spot are older people. And so we use the level death benefit right off the bat, and their cash value grows to equal and exceed the death benefit, usually within 10 years. The cost of insurance is zippo when you do it right, okay? The next myth that we want to talk about is that indexed universal life is what? Simply a permanent life insurance policy. This is Dave Ramsey and his team. It's simply a permanent life insurance policy where the cash values are invested in an indexed mutual fund. Now, if you would have done that with the S&P 500 during the Great Recession, 2000 to 2012, you would have lost 40% twice, like most Americans. Our clients doubled and tripled their money from 2000 to 2012 in IUL, okay? So indexing is a strategy. An indexed mutual fund is a commodity. And the next myth is that when using the banking concept, how many of you know what I'm talking about? How to become your own banker. When using the banking concept, that somehow whole life is superior. Now, I know Nelson Nash, I know Pamela Yellen, and all of these that talk about bank on yourself and infinite banking and so forth. I was using the banking concept far before any of them began. And I'll tell you what, indexed universal life blows whole life out of the water if you understand it when you're using the banking concept. And many who thought whole life was the best, when they finally got educated, they humbled themselves, they were blown away, okay? So let's dispel these myths, and I want you to listen very close as we go through these here for the next few minutes. It all begins with structuring IUL correctly and funding it properly. I'm very passionate about this. Last night, how many of you were in the group of the Success Society? And we were talking about 90 minutes. Did you get some epiphanies into how to do it correctly? Okay. So let me go through and make sure that we have some basics here. And I'm going to start with my own story. I began in 1974. Remember how old I am. I remember when Burger King was just a prince. I remember when Baskin Robbins only had one flavor of ice cream. Okay, that's how old I am. Now, I started in 1974, and I was actually selling insurance when I got my Series 1 securities license, which they don't offer anymore. I could sell any stock, bond, mutual fund, and what have you. And I was doing it as a means to the end of becoming an attorney, an estate planning attorney, okay? Well, there's a long story I won't go into. I had some scholarships at the university I was at, but my wife and I got married, and she technically died 3 times. The first year and a half we were married and came back. Okay? She had a horrible football-sized colon cyst mesh between her liver and pancreas when we were expecting our first child. It was miraculous that our child was born normal. And we've been blessed with 6 children. Now we have 20 grandkids, so we got through all of that. But in 1974, selling life insurance to clients 15 hours a week, I found out I was able to do that because of the flexibility. While I was trying to take care of my wife, and she was in intensive care on and off, and my little baby and so forth. And I was able to do that, and the dean of the college, when I had to start and stop my senior year several times, says, well, golly, how are you getting by? And I said, well, I'm making $70,000 a year, part-time, 15 hours a week. And he goes, that's twice what I make, and I'm the dean of this college. Why are you in school? And I said, well, actually, I love what I'm doing, and I never looked back, okay? Folks, from 1974 until 1980, what ended up happening, make sure this is advancing. There we go. Back up one now. There we go. So during this time period, I ended up being responsible for over 3,000 clients in 13 Western states, and I had licensed and trained over 1,000 agents with securities licenses and insurance licenses. This was back when there was only two kinds of life insurance, basically, term and whole life. And I was a big buy term, invest the difference proponent, because if you had a system that would invest the difference, if you don't invest the difference, then whole life sort of forces you to save, right? But back then, whole life only usually paid about 3.5%. So I was out there showing people how to do this, and putting people's money in mutual funds. We were trying to manage those, trying to time the market. And it's like playing red light, green light when you were a kid. Sometimes you have 20% gain years, but then you have 12% loss years. It's like playing red light, green light. You're going back and forth, right? But then it was E.F. Hutton, and they were primarily a brokerage firm that said, what are we thinking? Instead of trying to average 12%, which you don't do, but if you did, and you end up with $1 million nest egg at 12%, theoretically you should be able to pull out $120,000 a year without depleting principal, correct? Well, you pull out $120,000, you take 12 steps forward, you got to take 4 steps back in taxes. Most people who save between federal and state income taxes, 41 out of 50 states that has a state income tax, they're paying 1/3 in tax. So you take 8 steps forward, 4 steps back, you're netting 8, and there's another 1% in fees. So you had to earn 12 to net 7, and all E.F. Hutton said was, the best money managers in the world is the multi-trillion-dollar insurance industry. Let's just put money there, and we only have to earn 11 to net 10 if we do the opposite approach to life insurance and use it for what it's named, life, instead of death insurance, okay? And it was a great epiphany. And so what E.F. Hutton did is they released it was called Universal Life. Now, here's the difference. When they designed it to be used for life, for living benefits. And they said, let's take the least amount of insurance that we can get away with in the Internal Revenue Code, and let's put in the most money, the most premium the IRS allows, as fast as they allow, and this thing will turn into a tax-free cash cow. The primary purpose was for living tax-free accumulation of money and tax-free income. And you only had to earn 11 to net 10 because the cost of insurance only drained out 1%. That was money that would go out the window in what? Taxes. If you followed the herd, you'd have to earn 15 to net 10. Is this making sense? Okay? That's how that was all born in 1980. My brother-in-law was a manager of a E.F. Hutton office, and so my 3,000 clients in the market were never happier than when I got them out of the market. Now, interest rates are relative. What that means is when interest rates are high for borrowing, they're high for earning. When they're low for borrowing, they're low for earning. Back in 1980, interest rates were high. CDs at banks were paying 10%. I never got credited on my Universal Life less than 11.75% from 1980 to 1990. I got credited as high as 15.5%. I'm going to also show you that in 1974 and 1980, Jimmy Carter came in and we had double-digit inflation. Okay? Inflation hit 10, I was earning 15.5. I've always earned a rate of return on my money in Universal Life that was greater than the inflation rate at that time. If you understand what I'm going to teach you here, you link your returns to the things that inflate. I don't like inflation any more than anybody, but it doesn't hurt me. It helps me. You need to do this for your clients, okay? So Universal Life was released, and it was like buy term, invest the difference on steroids. It was on a tax-free umbrella. And then interest rates started to come down in the 1990s. And so a lot of insurance companies thought the solution was, well, let's put their money back in the market. That was variable life insurance. I've never owned a variable product. I never will. In 1997, I was the #1 agent with 2 companies. One of them was the first one to introduce indexed universal life. And I said, this is the answer to be able to participate when the market goes up and not lose when the market goes down. And I was able to still earn an average rate of return for my clients if I rebalance and diversify, have annual reviews with my clients. I've been able to average 11.17 and net 10.07, okay? And people say, I don't believe it. I've never seen one do that. Well, I can show you hundreds, okay? So that was when indexing was introduced. This is the brief history behind indexed universal life. This is 1997. Now, how do we do this? How does it work? There we go. E.F. Hutton realized in the Internal Revenue Code, now for over 108 years in one form or another, Permanent life insurance is the only financial vehicle that allows you to accumulate your money tax-free under 72E. The interest in it, they're tax-free, okay? 7702 dictates how you can access your money for living benefits, and all the gain is tax-free if you do it the right way. Section 101A says, at the end of the day, when you finally die, any money left in there will transfer and usually blossom, meaning increase in value, transfer tax-free. I have taught advanced continuing education to CPAs and tax attorneys for years. I always challenge them, show me anything else in the Internal Revenue Code that does that. Accumulate your money tax-free allows you to access it tax-free. When you die, it blossoms and transfers tax-free. They've never shown me anything else that does that. It's a miracle, okay? Now, if you don't know the history behind all of this, there was a massive exodus of money that left the banks and the brokerage firms into these because they were safer, they paid higher interest, they were tax-free, they blossomed when you died. And so the IRS went to Hutton and they said, what are you doing? We think you're overstepping the bounds of what we mean in these sections of the code. They went to court, if Hutton won, they weren't doing anything wrong. But then the IRS went to Congress and said, we've got to change the definition under the Internal Revenue Code of tax-free insurance. And so in 1982, under the Tax Equity Fiscal Responsibility Act, and the IRS didn't know what they were doing, how unusual. 2 years later, they redefined it under the Deficit Reduction Act, and that's the TEFRA-DEFRA corridor. These are tax citations that dictate the minimum amount of insurance based upon the insured's age, gender, and health, the minimum amount of insurance that had to be attached to the account in order to stay tax-free under these sections of the code. If you violated TEFRA and DEFRA, you exceeded the definition of life insurance and you moved over to another section of the code called investments that are now taxable sooner or later, and they're subject to volatility. I don't want that if that's the definition of an investment. I want tax-free insurance, okay? I don't care about the nomenclature, I just want tax-free. So that's TEFRA and DEFRA. What a lot of agents don't understand is under TEFRA and DEFRA, they gave parity. That's equality, which basically means this. Listen very close. It doesn't matter if you're a 22-year-old athletic marathon running female, or a 60-year-old, or if you're a 78-year-old friend of our family back then that came to us and he wanted to reposition $500,000 into a universal life policy. His goal was to get the best rate of return on his 500 grand. And back then you could put it in one fell swoop. He wanted to earn 11 and net 10 right off the bat, which he did. He had 3 blocked arteries, adult onset diabetes, a prostate cancer episode, 6 sisters predeceased, and 3 brothers. He had 1 foot in the grave. We got him approved table D. His life expectancy was that of an 83-year-old. And when he put $500,000 in his universal life policy, because of TEFRA and DEFRA, I was able to squeeze down the death benefit to just $700,000, because he didn't care about the death benefit, did he? It's nice, but he wanted the best rate of return of 500 grand. He put in 500 grand and instantly started pulling out 50 grand a year tax-free. He was earning 11 and net 10. The cost of insurance for him was the same as the 22-year-old athletic marathon running female. On TEFRA and DEFRA, the female just had to have more insurance than he did. But the rate of return is the same. It doesn't matter how old you are. And if he was totally turned down, if he was totally uninsurable, what would I do? I'd use a surrogate. I use a spouse, I use his kids, I use it, okay? It's the owner of the insurance policy that gets all the tax-free accumulation and tax-free income. That's why banks, BOLI, bank-owned life insurance, I was asked a few minutes ago back here, what happened? How can banks have insurance? Well, you're not putting the death benefit on a bank. Banks own life insurance on people. Okay? That's BOLI, bank-owned life insurance. Corporate, C-O-L-I is corporate-owned life insurance. That's what I do with my corporate assets. Okay? Now, folks, that is TEFRA and DEFRA. There was a massive exodus of money that left the banks and the brokerage firms into these from 1984 until 1988, and then they couldn't compete. They didn't want to kill these. Why didn't they want to kill these? This is where they put their money. But they wanted to slow the flow. So let's slow down the flow. because money was going in huge lump sums over to these, and they said, this is slow to flow. But they didn't want to kill them. We learned this in 2008. In 2008, and David Walker will talk about this tomorrow because he resigned when he was the comptroller of the General Accountability Office, but the Obama administration wouldn't allow him to tell the truth, how close we were to a collapse in this country. Now, the federal government asked the 5 major banks in 2008, when there were 400 that went under, and 900 more that were on the brink on the watch list, where do you have your Tier 1 assets? That's money that banks, credit unions have to have on hand, liquid and safe, in case they have a run on their bank. Where do they keep their money for liquidity and safety? Insurance companies. 30 to 40% of the Tier 1 assets is in insurance companies. Now, if you understand, again, the banking concept, banks in 2008 were paying less than 1%. Every $1 million of OPM, other people's money, they paid only 1% interest, 10 grand a year, and they were turning around putting it in insurance companies. They didn't even link to an index, and they were earning 5, the general account portfolio. How much more is 5 than 1? Don't say 4. 500%. Would you hire an employee for 10 grand? If that employee made you an extra 50 grand? That's a 500% return on employment cost, okay? So that's what was happening, and this is where the banks put their money. So when we talk about the TAMRA, the Technical and Miscellaneous Revenue Act, it was passed June 21st. I remember that day, just like I remember the day the space shuttle blew up, and I remember the day President Kennedy was shot. That's how old I am. Now, folks, TAMRA slowed the flow. You could still put money in a lump sum, but it would only grow tax deferred in the universal life. If you died, it blossomed and transferred tax-free, but if you wanted to turn on tax-free income or access money, you had to pay tax on it now, okay? It was like an annuity. If you wanted tax-free income, you had to comply with TAMRA. Now, TAMRA is something called the 7-pay test. That's a misnomer with regard to universal life. 7-pay is whole life. You cannot fund a whole life policy up to the limit except over a 7-payment period. Universal life used to be 5 years for people over age 55, 4 years for people under age 55. Now, 7702, I can maximum fund an IUL pretty much all the way full in 4 years and 3 years for younger people. So right off the bat, if I can put more money in faster into a universal life compared to a whole life, which one's going to be better right off the bat? Index universal life. You can put in more money, you can put in faster. Whole life, for the same amount of money, I have to have more life insurance than index universal life. So the whole life right off the bat is more expensive. Now, whole life is okay if you want death benefit, okay? If you want to make sure your death benefit's going to be there, whole life's okay. Can you use it for living benefits? Yeah, but it doesn't really handle the index universal life. And I'll prove it to you here in just a moment, because whole life is built on a chassis with guarantees. And the guarantees are there so the death benefit won't lapse. Well, I'm going to show you right now. If you structure IUL correctly, you'll be self-insured. Your cash value will grow to exceed the death benefit. The cost of insurance goes down. It gets cheaper as you get older. And you can't believe how many agents do not understand how to do what I just said. So I'm going to simplify it here, okay? So TAMRA, I've used this metaphor for years in my books. Here's the IUL policy. It's a bucket. And you're trying to structure an IUL policy to accommodate the amount of money you want to be grandfathered to put into it. But you're not trying to buy this much insurance for the least premium. You're trying to buy the least amount of insurance that you can get away with putting the most premium because you're using it for tax-free savings, okay? And so when you do that under different TAMRA, that's the corridor, and there's a spigot on the bucket, which is the cost of the insurance. So the IRS has to be there, or it's not going to be tax-free, okay? But it's actually watering a nice little money tree that's going to blossom when you die. I want that spigot to be money that would be going out the window and otherwise payable tax. I want Uncle Sam to pay for my insurance, like I was telling the Success Society last night. We don't object to insurance benefits. I've never had a widow or a widower turn down insurance. Just we object to paying for it. When people would say, Doug, do you sell insurance? Oh, no, I buy it for my clients. See, I structure it so that otherwise payable income tax pays for that spigot, pays for the insurance. I only have to earn 11 to net 10 If you put your money in the market, you have to earn 15 to net 10. That's a tax. I just take a minuscule portion of money that would have gone into in taxes, and it pays for the insurance, and I don't have to go out and try to earn 15, which is scary in the market to try to earn 15, right? You're taking unnecessary risks. Now, Tamara says, well, I can only fund it. Well, I like 5 payments, okay? So we put in money the first year, the second year. The fastest I could fill it up if I want to comply would be over a 5-year period. But technically speaking, you can put money in the first day of the first year, an annual premium, and the first day of the 5th year, that's 4 years in 1 day, you're maximum funded if you want to be. So the person who wanted to put in $500,000, they couldn't do it anymore in one fell swoop. But I could get it in 4 years in 1 day. Now I can get it in 3 years in 1 day for younger people, okay? And now it turns into a tax-free cash cow. So far, so good? Okay. Now, what do I mean by help your clients become self-insured? This is what a lot of agents don't understand. Let's go back to this bucket. So if I'm a 60-year-old male, let's say, and I want to reposition $500,000. Now you could be 35 years old and sock away. Let's say you're making $100,000 a year and you want to save $15,000 a year into this because it'll knock the socks off of an IRA form. Okay, so that's $15,000 a year. That's $1,250 a month. That will end up after 30 years being $500,000. This is called the guideline single premium. That's what you want to be grandfathered to put into it. Okay. But my sweet spot is 55 to 75-year-olds, and so many people go, well, is this good for that age? Oh my heavens. That's 95% of our business is 55 to 79-year-olds. This knocks the socks off of anything else they can do. It's the affluent that have the money, that are 60, 65, 70, 75. They contact us every week. Last month, we had 2 contact us. They watched the YouTube videos, they read the books, they looked at all the negative videos, and the one man said, I want a IUL bucket that will accommodate 12 million for me and my son. Well, I'm gonna go 12, he's gonna go 3 million. Another lady says, I have 150 million. I'm inheriting another 250 million. I need some buckets for me and all my kids to accommodate 250 million. Now these are multi-millionaires. Why would they want these? Because nothing else will do what this does for them, and they're multi-millionaires. So folks, if I were going to meet with a 60-year-old male, and they were going to reposition $500,000, okay, this is, I know this may sound large for some of you with the people you're working with, but when I started changing my focus and helping people 55 to 75, this is a small bucket. Many of our buckets are 5 million, okay? Let's use 500,000. You can extrapolate. Whether you're meeting with somebody talking away 500 a month, it doesn't matter. You calculate how much money do they want to put into it over the first 11 years. That's called the guideline single premium, okay? So the fastest they could put it in would be 100 grand, let's say, the first day of the first year. Now you can put in about 125. 100 grand the first day of the second year and so forth. And so in 4 years and 1 day, they have their 500,000 in there, and it's going to be worth more than that because they're earning some rates of return, right? But let's just keep it simple. Now, if I was using the increasing death benefit, if I died, that would be paid out on top of that. That's not the objective. That means as you get older, the cost of insurance is going to be higher. That spigot's going to get bigger because the cost per thousand on any insurance goes up every year, right? If you structure indexed universal life as a living benefit, you use the level death benefit when you stop funding or when you're going to fund it in this short of a period. The level death benefit means once I have 500,000 of cash value and I die, this is still the death benefit, but how much is the insurance company charging me for now? Only the net amount at risk, the remaining 500,000. That's all they're charging me for, because if I die, 500 grand of the million is my own money. People say, well, why wouldn't you want to leave behind $1.5 million? Well, it's still a great rate of return. If you die, you put in 500, you get back $1 million. No, I'm planning on living. Most of my clients want what? The best rate of return on 500,000. Now, most of my clients, within 7.5 years, that is doubled to $1 million. If you do rule of 72 math, The average return, even back to just universal life, before index universal life, has been 9.62% for my clients, okay? 9.6 divided into the rule of 72, your money will double every 7.5 years. In 7.5 years, so now we're in the 11th and a half year of this policy, this cash value equals that. How much is the insurance now? I am self-insured. My cash value has grown to equal the death benefit. There is no cost for the insurance. Why do I need whole life that guarantees $1 million death benefit when my cash value equals the death benefit within 11 years? I don't need any guarantees because my cash now is that. This is like buy, term, invest the difference on steroids. Okay? So now I have $1 million. I can prove to you every $1 million can generate $100,000 a year of tax-free income if I live to be 120. Okay, I'm not here to throw rocks at whole life, but sometimes if you have somebody touting the guarantees of whole life, just ask them this. Okay, put in an illustration showing the maximum funding of whole life policy as fast as the IRS allows, and then show me at age 65 the best, highest income they can take out tax-free from age 65 all the way to age 120 without that thing lapsing. And it'll be this. And I can do the same thing with indexed universal life, and their income will be this. And the insurance will cost way less. But what do you hear on the internet? Oh, it's going to crash and burn. Not if you've self-insured, because your cash value has grown to equal and exceed the death benefit. Is this making sense? Now, actually in Tefra and Defra, if you die, if I died when my cash value equals that, it would leave behind $1,050,000. If this doubles to $2 million in another 7.5 years and I die, they leave behind $2.1 million, but the insurance company's only charging for that $100,000 net amount of risk. I've got interest on $2 million, which dwarfs the cost of insurance, the spigot, on $100,000 of life insurance. If I earned 11, the 20th or 25th or 30th year into an IUL policy, if I earned 11 that year, I would net 10.95. But I usually simplify it all the way retroactive back to day one. If I earn 11, I usually net 10. If I earn 9, I net 8. If I earn 14, I net 13. Only 1 percentage point retroactive back to day one went to the cost of the insurance that the IRS said had to be there in order for it to be tax-free. Is this making sense? Okay. This is an incredible tool once you understand what I've been talking about here. Okay? Now this can be compared to like owning a 5-story building. If I build a 5-story building and the IRS said, okay, Mr. Andrew, you just built this building, I'll tell you what, if you just rent out the first floor the first year, and then we'll let you the first day of the second year rent out the second floor, okay? And then the third, and so forth. So after 5 years, 4 years and 1 day, now you can fill up your building, rent it out. All of your rental income forever after will be tax-free. I would do that. That is TAMRA. That is a max-funded IUL. All you have to do is jump through those hoops and it turns into a cash cow, tax-free, okay? So you fund it according to TAMRA. The fastest would be 5 years. Do you have to take 5 years? No, you can do it over 30 years, okay? 500 a month, 1,000 a month, whatever. But you're taking the least amount of insurance, and then once you've funded it, you move to level death benefit. Always, if you want to make the insurance get cheaper as you get older. Okay? If you don't do that, then it could crash and burn. Instead of earning 11, you might only net 8. I want to earn 11 and net 10. Okay, now here is indexing. Crismont, they said from 1960 to 2010, a 50-year period, they said if you eliminate 100% of the loss years, now usually in a 10-year period, there's 3 down years compared to 7 up years. Now 2000 to 2010, there were 5 loss years, okay? And in that period, if you wouldn't have rebalanced, you would have earned 7.23%. $1 million would have doubled to $2 million in an IUL. Right, rebalancing, our clients, $1 million was worth $2.5 to $3 million by 2012, okay? When most people were barely back to break even. So what does this mean? If you eliminated 100% of the loss years, you didn't make anything, but you didn't lose. You would only need 25% of the gain years, the up years of the market, to outperform the market. Having your money in the market, okay? This is why Warren Buffett says the first two rules of investing is don't lose money, and rule number 2, don't forget rule number 1. Okay. So, indexing, if you don't understand indexing, if I had $1 million of cash value in my IUL policy, and if I feel bearish about America this year, I could just say, hey, just